I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am. 20 years ago, when I first met my wife, everything seemed perfect. She was this incredible person, smart, charming, and had this spark in her eyes that made everyone around her feel special. We clicked instantly, and within a year we had our daughter. Life felt like a dream come true. We lived in a cozy apartment, just the three of us. Our little girl was growing up to be this amazing bundle of joy, and watching her learn new things every day made my heart swell with pride. My wife and I had started planning our wedding. Nothing too fancy, just a small celebration with family and friends. Our daughter was beyond excited about being the flower girl, practicing her walk down the aisle with a little basket full of paper flowers she'd made herself. But life had planned a different story for us. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was walking home from work when this guy approached me. At first, I thought he was trying to sell something, or maybe asking for directions. But then he mentioned my wife's name, and my world started to tilt. He asked if we could talk somewhere private, and against my better judgment, I agreed. He wasn't just some random stranger, he was seeing my wife. Had been for the past 2 years. He knew things about her that only someone close would know. Her favorite breakfast, the small birthmark on her shoulder, the name of her childhood pet. Things that made my stomach churn. I rushed home, praying it was all some cruel joke. But when I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she told me how this other man made her feel young and alive again. How being a mother had taken away her freedom. How all those I love yous and talks about our future together had been lies. The worst part? She seemed relieved that I finally knew. Like she'd been carrying this burden, and now she could finally put it down. I begged her to reconsider, to think about our family, our daughter. I'm not proud of it, but I pleaded with her to give us another chance. She just looked at me with cold eyes and said she wanted out. The next morning, she was gone. Just like that. 7 years of building a life together, erased in a single day. But the real pain came from watching our 5-year-old daughter try to understand why her mommy didn't want her anymore. She had overheard parts of our argument, including the bit where her mother said she didn't want to be a mom anymore. Those words cut deeper than any knife could. Thank God for our families. Both my parents and her parents stepped up in ways I never expected. Her parents were especially supportive. They were so ashamed of what their daughter had done that they could barely look me in the eye without apologizing. My mom would come over to help with childcare when I had to work late, and my dad taught our little girl how to ride a bike, something I was still struggling to find time for between work and everything else. The next few years were tough, but we made it through. My daughter and I became a team. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our movie nights with popcorn battles. We went to therapy, both together and separately. Slowly, the wound started to heal, though the scar would always remain. That's where I thought our story would end. Just me and my daughter, building our life together. But life, as I mentioned, has its own plans. 10 years passed, and my daughter grew into this amazing teenager. She was everything I could have hoped for, smart, kind, and surprisingly wise for her age. We had built a good life together. Our 2-bedroom apartment wasn't fancy, but it was home. We had our weekly traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, movie marathons on rainy days, and long walks in the park where we'd make up stories about the people we saw. Then one evening, as we were returning from her volleyball practice, we saw someone standing outside our building. Even from a distance, I recognized her. My daughter grabbed my hand. She knew too. Her mother stood there, looking like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Time had been kind to her. She looked even more elegant than I remembered, dressed in an expensive-looking outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd love to say I acted cool and collected, but seeing her after all these years made my heart race like I was 20 again. Pathetic, right? My daughter squeezed my hand once, and then walked past her mother without a word, heading up to our apartment to give us space to talk. Sometimes I wonder when she got so mature. We sat in our living room, the same room where she'd told me she was leaving 10 years ago. She talked for what felt like hours. She told me about her life after she left, how she'd lived with that guy for a few years, enjoying the thrill of it all. She described it as the most exciting time of her life, until it wasn't. When the excitement faded, she started cheating on him too. Then came a string of relationships, each shorter than the last, until they weren't even relationships anymore, just meaningless encounters. She said she thought about us sometimes, about the family we were, but her pride kept her from reaching out. Then last year, she got really sick with COVID. She thought she was going to die alone in a hospital room, and that's when it hit her, how empty her life had become, how stupid she'd been to throw away what we had. "I'm ready now," she said. ready to be the wife and mother I should have been. We can be a family again. I told her I needed time to think. She agreed to leave, saying she'd come back the next day. And she did. Every day for the next week, she showed up, talking about our good memories, about how we could be happy again. I felt myself wavering. Part of me, that stupid, hopeful part that never quite got over her, wanted to believe her. I talked to everyone I trusted. My best friend called me an idiot for even considering it. My sister threatened to knock some sense into me if I took her back. But some people, like my cousin who had reconciled with his ex-wife, said everyone deserves a second chance. The turning point came during a late-night talk with my daughter. We were sitting on our balcony, sharing a tub of ice cream, our tradition for serious conversations. She looked at me and asked, "Dad, can you really love someone who hurt us so badly?" The way she said us broke my heart all over again. She was right. This wasn't just about me and my feelings. Whatever lingering emotions I had for her mother weren't worth risking my daughter's happiness and stability. The next day, I told her mother the truth. I said she could try to build a relationship with our daughter if that's what our daughter wanted, but we would never be a couple again. She didn't take it well. She said she'd make me fall in love with her again, that she wouldn't give up. She kept pushing for meetings, sending messages, trying to talk. Finally, I agreed to meet her one last time at a coffee shop downtown to set things straight. I needed to make my boundaries crystal clear. The conversation was harder than I expected. I asked her the tough questions. Was she really sorry, or were we just her last resort? Did she actually love us, or were we just a backup plan because she couldn't find anyone else? Was it love bringing her back, or just the fear of being alone? She couldn't give me straight answers. Instead, she kept saying things like, "It's not like that, and you need to understand, and I've changed." What struck me was how she barely mentioned our daughter until I pointed it out. Then suddenly, she started throwing our daughter's name into every other sentence, like she'd just remembered she existed. When she realized her words weren't working, she tried a different approach. She grabbed my hand across the table, letting her blouse slip a bit lower, suggesting we could get a room somewhere, that she'd do anything to make it up to me. It was like watching a stranger wear my wife's face. This wasn't the woman I fell in love with, not the mother of my child. I didn't even recognize her anymore. I told her to let go of my hand, that it was over, that neither me nor our daughter wanted her in our lives. We were happy without her. That's when she snapped. She started yelling about how I couldn't keep her away, that she had rights, that she didn't have anything else left. Then she said something about her daughter, and something in me broke. "Your daughter?" I exploded. "Where were you when she had the flu and couldn't sleep for 3 nights straight? Where were you when she lost her first tooth and wanted to show her mommy? Where were you on her first day of school when she was so scared she cried all morning? Where were you when she got her first period and needed her mother? Where were you when her first boyfriend broke her heart? Actually, scratch that, you were her first heartbreak. You were too busy jumping from one bed to another while she needed her mother. You don't get to call yourself her mother just because you gave birth to her." She tried to say something, but for once, she couldn't find the words. I left her sitting there and went home. Later, she sent messages begging for another chance, saying she loved me, that she could change. But I was finally done. I could see clearly now, she didn't love me or our daughter. She only loved herself. My daughter and I decided to go back to therapy. Some of my friends were right. I needed to work on myself, get stronger, and finally let go of those feelings for her. They weren't real anymore. They were just memories of someone who never really existed. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the happy ending isn't getting back together. Sometimes it's finding the strength to close a door that should have stayed shut. My daughter and I have our own kind of family. It might not be traditional, but it's real, it's strong, and it's built on love and trust, not just empty promises. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means accepting what happened and choosing to move forward. That's what we're doing now, moving forward, one day at a time, building our life together. And honestly, that's more than enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button to help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.